So, no one is coming to pick me up? Not even you, my son? My voice cracked through the hospital phone, thin and desperate. On the other end, silence stretched like an eternity, then a sigh that felt like a slap across my face. "Mom, we're busy," my son muttered, his voice distant and cold. "You'll manage." A sharper voice cut in. My daughter-in-law, Sarah. Her tone was ice wrapped in fake sweetness. "Linda, you're not a child anymore. Call a cab. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. We have our own lives to live." The line went dead with a brutal finality. The dial tone buzzed in my ear like a death sentence. The nurse glanced at me, pity swimming in her kind eyes. "No one's coming for you, Ms. Williams?" I pressed the phone to my chest, my heart hammering against my ribs. No, no one. The truth cut deeper than the surgery stitches ever could. My own flesh and blood had abandoned me like yesterday's garbage. What would you do if your own family abandoned you in a hospital bed? Would you forgive or make them regret it? Tell me in the comments. The woman in the bed beside me had flowers covering every surface. Balloons bobbed cheerfully from the ceiling. Her children came and went like a parade of love. They brought homemade cookies, fresh magazines, and warm hugs. Nurses cooed, "Such a loving family, Mrs. Peterson. You're so blessed to have them." My bedside table sat barren and forgotten. No flowers, no cards, no evidence that I mattered to anyone. My phone stayed silent as a tomb. When nurses asked gently, "No family visiting today?" I forced a brittle smile that felt like broken glass. They're just busy with work. You know how it is these days. But inside, each word was a lie that poisoned my soul. The man across the hall got daily visits from his church group. Every afternoon, they gathered around his bed like guardian angels. A sweet-faced child read him a handmade card. "Get well soon, Grandpa Joe. We're praying for you." I listened from my empty bed, tears burning tracks down my cheeks. My own grandchildren hadn't even called once. Not once. Sarah had probably told them I was being dramatic again. On my fourth day, I overheard the nurses talking at their station. "Room 237 never has visitors," one whispered. "That poor woman. Imagine being so alone. Her son called once to ask about insurance, but that's it. Some people have no heart." I pulled the blanket over my head and wept silently. The shame was suffocating. Everyone could see I was unwanted, unloved, disposable. I sat dressed in my worn sweater, bag packed and ready. I'd been waiting on the edge of my bed for 3 hours. Every time footsteps echoed in the hallway, my heart leaped. Every time a car pulled up outside, I straightened, hope fluttering. Maybe this time. Maybe they'd come. Maybe they'd realized their mistake. But every time, it wasn't them. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, mocking my vigil. Finally, Nurse Janet came with that gentle, pitying smile. "Ms. Williams, visiting hours are almost over. Do you want me to call a taxi for you?" My throat tightened like a noose. "Yes, please." The word tasted like defeat. I shuffled out through the automatic doors, clutching my small bag. Other patients waved goodbye to their families with tears of joy. Children called out, "Feel better, Grandma." Spouses kissed foreheads tenderly. I left in complete silence. The taxi driver didn't even help me with my bag. I turned the key in my front door with trembling fingers. The house greeted me with stale air and dust particles dancing in the fading light. No food in the refrigerator, no flowers on the counter, no welcome home banner. Just emptiness echoing my footsteps. I heated soup from a dented can, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the spoon. Through my kitchen window, I saw neighbors peeking through their curtains. Their whispers carried on the evening breeze. She came home alone? Not even her son picked her up? That's just pathetic. Imagine being left like that. Poor thing. I heard she was in there for a week. Her own family couldn't be bothered. Their pity felt like acid on my skin. Sunday morning came like a cruel joke. I dragged myself to church, hoping familiar faces would warm my heart. Instead, I found fresh humiliation. In the fellowship hall, I overheard Sarah's voice carrying across the room. She was holding court with her friends, gesticulating dramatically. Honestly, Linda exaggerates everything. She's so dramatic about the smallest things. The surgery was minor, but she acted like she was dying. We need our space, you know? She clings to us like a vine. Sometimes you have to set boundaries with difficult parents. Her friends nodded sympathetically. You're such a saint for putting up with it. I don't know how you manage. Laughter bubbled up from their circle like poison. My cheeks burned with shame and rage. Every word was a stone crushing my chest. I slipped out the back door before anyone could see my tears. That evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The silence was deafening. I still wore the plastic hospital bracelet they hadn't bothered to cut off. It felt like a brand of abandonment on my wrist. I stared at my late husband's photograph on the mantel. His kind eyes seemed to look right through me. John, they left me in that bed like I was nothing. Like I was disposable trash. Your son, our son, couldn't even be bothered to pick up his own mother. But I am not disposable. I am Linda Grace Williams, and I will not go quietly into the night. Tears blurred my eyes, but then something shifted inside me. The tears dried, my spine straightened, my lips curled into a thin, sharp smile. They wanted me invisible, John. I'll make myself unforgettable. I didn't strike in blind anger like a wounded animal. I struck with the patience of a chess master. Every move calculated, every step deliberate. I spent my recovery period like a warrior preparing for battle. Morning walks around the neighborhood, my head held high. New dresses that made me feel powerful. My hair fixed at the salon where I used to feel self-conscious. I wanted the world to see me glow while they assumed I was broken. The neighbors who had pitied me began to whisper differently. Linda looks wonderful, so strong. She's really bounced back from her surgery. I admire her resilience. The lawyer's office felt like a sanctuary of justice. Mr. Henderson had handled my family's legal affairs for 20 years. His face was grave as I explained what I wanted. Are you certain about this, Linda? This is a significant change. I signed the papers with steady hands, each signature a small victory. Everything I owned, the house John and I had built together, the farmland passed down through generations, the savings we'd accumulated over 40 years of marriage, was removed from their names. My son and his wife were erased from my inheritance like pencil marks. I began donating quietly, but strategically. A beautiful piano to the community hall where young musicians could practice. Scholarships in John's name for children who couldn't afford college. Food drives at church that fed dozens of struggling families. Money for the children's hospital where sick babies fought for their lives. Every act of kindness carried my name like a gentle whisper. Linda Williams donated this. What a generous woman. She has such a good heart. The community began to see me differently. Respect replaced pity. Admiration replaced sympathy. I spent weeks crafting the perfect moment, a grand luncheon at church. Public, formal, crowded with everyone who mattered. I made sure my son and daughter-in-law received elegant invitations, hand calligraphed, embossed with gold. They thought it was just another charity event. They had no idea it was their judgment day. The fellowship hall buzzed with anticipation. I had spared no expense. Fresh flowers adorned every table. Crystal glasses caught the afternoon light. The finest catered meal our little church had ever seen. My daughter-in-law strutted in like a peacock. She wore a red silk dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her parents flanked her like bodyguards. She smiled at the crowd with practiced charm. It's always so important to support community causes, she announced loudly. We believe in giving back. The irony was delicious. During the meal, she held court at her table. Her voice carried across the room as she regaled her audience. "You have no idea how exhausting it's been, taking care of Linda after her surgery. We barely had a moment to ourselves. She's so needy, calling constantly. Sometimes sacrifice is just part of being a good family." Her friends gasped sympathetically. "You're such a devoted daughter-in-law. She's so lucky to have you." I sat at the head table, watching, waiting. The moment was perfect. I stood slowly. My chair scraped against the floor like a gavel calling for order. Conversation died. All eyes turned to me. The silence was electric. "Exhausting?" My voice cut across the hall like a blade. "What an interesting choice of words, Sarah." Her face went pale. My son looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Because I have a very different memory of my recent surgery. I remember lying in a hospital bed for 7 days, staring at an empty doorway. Watching other families laugh and cry and hold each other. I remember calling my only son, begging for someone to pick me up. And hearing, "Mom, we're busy, you'll manage." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I remember nurses asking gently, "No family visiting today?" And me lying, "They're just busy." Because I was too ashamed to admit the truth. I held up the hospital bracelet, still attached to my wrist. "This is my truth, Sarah. This plastic band that no one cared enough to cut off. This symbol of abandonment. And this," I gestured to the beautiful luncheon, the flowers, the community gathered around us. "This is my reply." I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick folder. Legal documents, official seals. While you were too busy to visit your dying mother-in-law, I was busy too. I rewrote my will. Every penny I own, every acre of land, every brick of the house you thought would be yours. Gone. Removed from your names like you removed me from your lives. The crowd was riveted. Some people started to clap. Everything I've built now belongs to people who actually cared. To this church that prayed for me. To the children's hospital that needs healing. To the community that lifted me when my own family let me fall. My daughter-in-law's face went from red to white. "Linda, you can't do this." "Oh, but I can," I said, my voice steady as stone. "You see, I learned something important in that hospital bed. Family isn't blood, Sarah. Family is loyalty. Family is love. Family is showing up. And you failed every test." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. My son buried his face in his hands. "The house where you plan to live? It's going to become a shelter for abandoned elderly. The savings you counted on? Scholarships for children who know the value of family. The land you thought you'd inherit? A community garden where people will grow food for those in need." I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "You wanted me to disappear quietly. Instead, I'll be remembered forever." The applause grew louder. People stood up. Some wiped away tears. That night, I sat in my glowing kitchen. Moonlight streamed through clean windows. I sipped chamomile tea from my best china. Outside, neighbors passed by, nodding with newfound respect. "Good evening, Mrs. Williams. Lovely dinner today. You're an inspiration," I whispered to John's photograph. "They thought they could throw me away like garbage, my love. They left me to rot in that hospital bed. But I didn't rot. I bloomed. I grew stronger in that silence. And tonight, they learned what happens when Linda Grace Williams rises from the ashes." My eyes gleamed with satisfaction. They thought I was their burden. Instead, I became their judgment. They'll remember this day for the rest of their lives. Every time they drive past that house they'll never own. Every time they see a child with a scholarship in John's name. Every time someone mentions the generous Linda Williams. They'll remember the woman they threw away. And how she made them pay. The phone rang the next morning. My son's voice was broken. Mom, please. We can work this out. We made a mistake. I sipped my coffee calmly. Yes, you did make a mistake, David. You forgot that your mother is a human being with feelings. You forgot that abandonment leaves scars. But some mistakes can't be undone. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. The line was quiet except for his ragged breathing. I hope you learned something from this experience. I hope you never treat anyone the way you treated me. Because someday, you might need someone to show up for you. And they might remember how you showed up for others. I hung up gently. Outside my window, children played in the park. Soon, this house would shelter people who had nowhere else to go. People whose families had forgotten them. People who needed second chances. Just like I had. I smiled at John's picture. Thank you for watching over me, my darling. Thank you for giving me the strength to stand up. They thought they could break Linda Grace Williams. But she rose from that hospital bed like a phoenix. And when she spread her wings, the whole world saw her fly. Thank you for watching until the very end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything to this old woman who refused to stay silent. And tomorrow, join me as I tell you about the time my family tried to humiliate me on my 70th birthday. But my payback made them cry in front of everyone. Until then, remember, never underestimate the power of a woman who has nothing left to lose and everything to gain.